Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Sunday, November the 17th, and we are starting on time, 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. And I'm going to remind you about our new directives for our live stream. Of course, we are free to discuss about geography, about business in general, about everything that it is exciting to foreign citizens, to our friends who attend here our live streams. But we are avoiding answering legal questions because of a recent interpretation of a decision by the São Paulo Bar Association. The São Paulo Bar Association is understanding that attorneys should not answer like legal questions in any type of public forum unless the person who's getting the answers is paying for a legal consultation. And of course, we cannot have a paid legal consultation within the live stream. So what we can do is, like, if you have a specific topic of your interest, if you want to know more about a certain type of visa, if you want to know more about a certain type of legal procedure in Brazil, yes, I am free to talk about the legal point in general, as long as I am not answering specifically legal questions, right? Because yes, if we're answering legal questions directly in a very specific manner, the understanding from the São Paulo Bar Association is that we are not following the ethical standards imposed by the Bar Association. All right, so not our choice. I wish I could, give as much as I could to you guys, particularly when we have like multiple people watching the live stream. It is in my understanding that it is just fine. It's not really a consultation, right? So why worry about giving answers? But of course, like, we don't want to get in trouble with the São Paulo Bar Association, and therefore we are changing slightly. We are changing slightly the format of our live stream, so we can continue to meet with you guys without much worry. All right, I hope that makes sense. We have our first friend here, Mark Burgard. Good afternoon, Sr. Luciano Oliveira. Tudo bem? Yes, Mark, everything pretty good. How's everything with you, Mark? Let us know where you are, in which point of your journey to Brazil you are as we speak, Mark. And in the meantime, let me see if I have a couple of things to share with you guys. There are some interesting news, like cross-border interesting news related to Brazil and actually the United States as well. Let's take a look at the first one. So before I tell you guys about what's going on, I'm gonna ask you. It looks like we just have like 4 participants as of now. That's okay. I'm still gonna ask. Do you guys know who is this lady on the picture? Mark and any other participant. That's my question for you. Do you guys know who this lady is and why I'm showing this lady today in our live stream? Let's see if we get any answers. Let me see. Any answers? No answers so far. So I'm gonna go ahead and tell you who this lady is. This lady is Brazil's first lady, actually, right? So it's not just any lady, but it is Brazil's first lady. All right, Mark is answering over here. Oh, all right, thanks. I'm now back in Campinas from a 3-month trip around the northeast of Brazil. So nice, Mark. And what did you visit in the northeast? Like, I mean, I hope you went to Ceará and Bahia. I love the entire northeast of Brazil for sure. You guys probably know Ceará is my, number one state, the state in which I actually spend most of my time, like in Brazil. And but I'm from São Paulo, so like a 50-minute drive from Campinas. But in the Northeast, I also love Bahia, right? Like, I mean, I had, like amazing trips to Bahia during my 20s. And it was such a blast, okay? Like a really, really a special state like Bahia. All right, but now going back to this lady here that you guys see in my screen, that's Brazil's first lady. So she is President Lula's wife, and she goes by the nickname Janja. Okay, that's her nickname, a very interesting nickname, Janja, right? Janja. So Janja is a little bit controversial. Okay, she's very lively. Like she speaks out her mind. And she is like, this picture that you see over here is actually from Folha de São Paulo, right? You can see the source over there. Folha de São Paulo is the largest newspaper in Brazil. And they also happen to have like the largest internet news portal in the country. And they are kind of criticizing, right, which is kind of rare because they are very aligned with the President Lula administration. They're very aligned with a more like left-oriented side of politics in Brazil. So they kind of avoid criticizing President Lula. They are actually, vouching for pretty much everything that President Lula does. But now they went out of their way to criticize, like Lula's wife, Brazil's first lady, right? Like they said, she spoke, a lot of things that were not helpful for Lula's administration and the government in general. And she was actually, or she's actually, right? She is participating in the Brazil G20. Right, I told you guys about the G20. The G20 it's an event, as you probably know, is an event among 20 of the main countries members of the UN. So the G20 is this collection of countries, including Brazil, China, and all the, let's say, the top 20 main countries, members of the United Nations. And they are kind of organizing themselves to come up with ideas for economical development for not just the G20, but, actually the world as a whole, right? So in addition to these countries, there is actually a participation of the European Union and the African nations under a single umbrella. And in the G20, every year you have, it's a rotating president for the G20. So between 2023 and 2024, President Lula was the president of G20, and he's going to be the president of G20 up to the end of this year, right? So the G20 is now meeting in Rio de Janeiro, and it's causing like some very interesting and unusual things, such as the mayor of Rio de Janeiro creating like two additional holidays out of thin air, right? Meaning that in our office in Rio de Janeiro, like we are unable to have our employees tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday, which should be just regular business days, right? And to make things even tougher for us who are trying to run a business, like we had already a holiday on Friday. It was the day of the proclamation of the Brazilian Republic, which traditionally is a major holiday, so no problem with it. Like it is in our calendar, we plan ahead of time. There is an additional one. On Wednesday. And then, the mayor of Rio de Janeiro said, you know what? Rio de Janeiro typically has a horrible traffic. Okay, just to give you an idea, for those of you who know Rio de Janeiro, the main locations, if you try to cross Rio de Janeiro, coming from the southwest to Rio de Janeiro downtown, like during daytime, it's going to take you an hour if it's not like peak time, and it's going to take you over 2 hours if it is peak time, right? Like, so to cross the city, it's horrible. And this is on a normal day, right? Now imagine if you are having like a G20 with literally like, several thousands of people coming from abroad to participate. So the city doesn't really function. And therefore, like the mayor had this brilliant idea of saying, you know what, I'm going to make a holiday. And therefore, because on Friday it's a holiday, when is it going to be another holiday? Guess what? Everybody's going to leave Rio de Janeiro. So the G20 participants are going to have the city pretty much for themselves, right? It's an interesting idea. If you are a participant of G20, if you are running a business like we are, not so much. But anyway, so Janja, Brazil's first lady, has said a ton of things. Like I said, she speaks out her mind. And among those things, like, she tried to make a joke. I think the joke didn't work as well as she intended. It was more like a joke. Her mic was not working. And she said, of course, like she was joking. She said, well, you know what? My mic is not working. Guess whose fault this is? This is whose fault, right? And then she said, it's Elon Musk's fault. And guess what? She said, F you, Elon Musk, right? I don't know where this came from, but I mean, it didn't work well. It did sound very nasty in the context. And of course, she was trying to joke because Elon Musk is not manipulating her mic, right? But she was just joking, but the joke didn't sound well. Like there was a silence, everybody was just saying, well, what was she talking about? Why she's, swearing and calling people's names. And there was a really, poor choice of words, particularly coming from a first lady, right? Like, first ladies, they are not supposed to say F you to anyone. And she did so, and she said, F you, Elon Musk. And that was very, concerning. Elon Musk, and Elon Musk knew from the X platform about it, that, and she just, entered a bunch of smiling faces. I mean, it was so, like he got the joke. But then I don't know if he took advantage of this like mishap, and he said, well, you guys are going to lose the next election, right? Like, so it was like a kind of, building up on the aggravation, on all the aggravation that Elon Musk faced in Brazil through the, Brazilian, highest court, the Brazilian Supreme Court, which kind of, first shut down the X platform, and then after that, in a very kind of, a polemical decision, went after the SpaceX and Starlink assets to collect on fines that the Supreme Court was applying over Elon Musk for not following orders to shut down a bunch of accounts from the right side of the political spectrum, right? So that was one of the problems solved by Folha de São Paulo, this like major Brazilian newspaper with the first lady. But there were several others, right? Like, I mean, if she's speaking out her mind, she's also saying a bunch of things that people are saying are not helpful at all for her husband, President Lula. All right, so that's the first piece of news that I wanted to bring it to you guys today. All right. Okay. The 552 is joking. Welcome, 552. I thought she was Giselle Bündchen's mom or someone or something. Haha. Yeah, I mean, she's not like, she's kind of, like a beautiful woman, right? Like, I mean, and President Lula is like, I think he's 78 or 79. And she is, if I'm not mistaken, she is in her early 50s, right? And you can tell like she takes good care of herself. So she's a beautiful woman, right? No denial. That's a good point to the 552. Mark Burgard, everywhere from southern Bahia all the way up to Jericoacoara. All right, Mark, I can see you didn't skip any of the must see towns around, right? Like Jericoacoara. I love Jericoacoara. It's already, kind of hyped, but it's hyped for a reason, right? Like everybody wants to go there. So when you go there and when it is like, like peak season, it is like a lot of people, but still, I think, like Jericoacoara does bring like an amazing experience. It does not matter if it is your first time, if it is your, if you're visiting for the 10th time, is still amazing. Jericoacoara, for those of you who do not know, is in the north of Ceará, right? In the north of Ceará, or in Ceará, it's kind of funny because it's like the Fortaleza, the capital, is like close to almost like a vertical line. And then some people, they say north and south of Fortaleza, but there are also people who say west and east of Fortaleza, depending on how you think about the geography of Ceará. But Jericoacoara, what makes Jericoacoara different from other must-see cities in Ceará is the fact that Jericoacoara is not close by. It's actually very difficult for you to access. And that's one of the things that make Jericoacoara special, because, you need to kind of strive to arrive to this place. So when you get there, it's almost like it's a reward, right? And other cities in Ceará, I think some of them, they are going to be even more beautiful than Jericoacoara. But you just driving there, right? Like, so I don't think you see that much value because it is so easy to get to the other cities. But Jericoacoara is a struggle, right? Like, you need to go, you need to drive, a lot if you're coming from Fortaleza or other cities. And once you're getting closer, like the roadways, they start to get worse and worse to the point in which most people, they are not going to even try to drive to Jericoacoara. They are going to actually park in the city of Jeri, right? The name Jericoacoara is a specific village, but before the village of Jericoacoara, there is Jeri, which is like an urban city. So people are going to drive up to Jeri, and then they are going to park their cars over there, and then they are going to have to rent like specific types of truck that are going to be able to drive into the village of Jeri. Okay, I was able to drive all my way to Jericoacoara, but I was renting a special type of car, like a 4x4 type of, it wasn't a truck, it was an SUV. And it did have 4x4, meaning traction on all the four wheels. And even like driving this special type of SUV, it was a struggle, right? Like, I guess I've been driving in Brazil for my entire life. So that's probably why I was able to make it. But, during the trip, I was able to count maybe 10 cars stuck like in the beaches and the sand, right? Like, all this area surrounding Jericoacoara has a very particular and beautiful type of white sand, and it's beautiful, but it's really hard to drive over this type of sand. And when people try to do it, they don't usually succeed. So I was able to pull this off, but I wouldn't do it again, because in a certain part of the trip, like between Jeri and Jericoacoara, I almost got stuck. And I was with my family. I said, listen, if I would get stuck over here, we would probably waste a half a day and spend a boatload of money, because like once you are stuck, guess what? There are going to be people to help you, but they're not going to be helping you for nothing, right? Like, they do charge crazy money, and that's how, they make their living. They are going to have special types of truck. They are going to help you, get released from the sand dunes, but this is going to cost you a boatload of money. So I was very lucky, and I wouldn't try again. Next time, I'm going to Jericoacoara. I'm going to do as usual, right? Like just park in Jeri, and then, yes, you rent one of the, specialized trucks, to cross the final stretch of dunes between Jeri and Jericoacoara. But an amazing experience, right? Like, I mean, even for me, who, I'm very familiar with the state of Ceará. I know cities throughout the state. I'm still like, I still think that Jericoacoara is very special, right? Like there is nothing compared to Jericoacoara. There are places that I think that are more beautiful than Jericoacoara. For instance, I really love Morro Branco, right? Or the White Hills. That's the beach in which I stay. But Jericoacoara is certainly a great choice. All right, Mark Burgard, she has shown her true colors by doing that. I think that's what people are saying, Mark. Like that's exactly what people are saying. Now, it's not her first time, so it's kind of just, like reminding people of her true colors. That's more the conversation we see going on. Like, I mean, like she sometimes she does get like out of place. Something else that people criticize a lot, like whenever she goes to Europe with President Lula, like, I mean, she's too much. I mean, like if you see, like if you search pictures of President Lula, Janja, and Macron, like France's president, you're going to see Janja all over Macron. I mean, it's kind of weird, right? You're going to see Macron and then his wife, like a feet away from him. And Janja is going to be grabbing Macron. Like she's going to be all over Macron. It's weird, right? Like, I mean, it's weird to say the least. All right, Mark. So this type of concern is kind of recurring. But I don't know, maybe she's just like too lively, extremely lively, right? Like, I mean, she's basically just too much, okay? And there you go. So I was talking about the G20 and the 552. Is Lula viewed as a Joe Biden in Brazil? Exactly the 552. That's exactly the case. And it's interesting, to note how much Brazil kind of... follow whatever it's happening in the United States. It looks like almost like a deja vu, right? Almost like a deja vu. Like, Biden in the United States is like Lula in Brazil, right? And like Lula is much sharper than President Joe Biden is, unfortunately, right? Like, I mean, Joe Biden, he was a very... how can I say, a very important political figure, right? Like for the United States, he did win fairly and squarely from Trump in the last election. But listen, I think everybody can tell, and maybe that's one of the reasons why Kamala Harris lost the election. It is because like Democrats were hiding the fact that President Biden was in in a bad shape. Like from a intellectual perspective, like he's really, very old, and he's not holding well when it comes like, to his mental skills. Now, President Lula, on the other hand, he's pretty sharp still. So from that perspective, maybe it's not like a perfect match between what Brazil is facing now and what Biden faced in the U.S., right? But still, President Lula is for sure not the same. He's not the same, and he's not being able to accomplish most of the things he wanted to accomplish, okay? Despite having like a very strong support from the Brazilian Supreme Court that whenever they are going to jump in a political decision is going to be to support President Lula, right? There is no denial. There is a clear alignment between President Lula and the Supreme Court, and they are each they are supporting each other's, right? So from this perspective, maybe that's why nothing has happened to President Lula so far, like for instance, like an impeachment, or I don't know, or whatever could remove him from the political loop. So he's holding steady. but most of the things he tries to accomplish, he's unable to accomplish, right? Like the Congress, the Senate, they are always, oh, you know what? Like, I mean, just enjoy the presidency. Let us run the business over here. So that's what's kind of happening in Brazil. So yes, it does have some parallel. To what you see in Brazil. So here is a picture of the G20 summit. Okay, the G20 summit that is running this week in Rio de Janeiro. This is like from the official website from G20. Again, President Lula is like the president of the G20 group. Like every year, it is a rotating position. So President Lula is the president of the G20 up to the end of this year. Next year, it's going to be a different president coming, of course, naturally, from one of the 20 countries, members of the G20. G20, I believe, like the 20 most important countries in the United Nations, right? So there you go. All right, I see here, Bill. Bill, good to see you over here. Bill is gently reminding you guys to like our live stream. I'm glad that you have you here, Bill, and thank you for the reminder. So the G20 is happening as we speak. It is always something big. Like people love to participate in the G20 in Rio de Janeiro because it's a really nice combination, of meeting world leaders and enjoying Rio de Janeiro, right? Like who doesn't want to enjoy G20, right? Like who wants to go to Paris or France when you can go to Rio de Janeiro? 10 times better, right? Like, I mean, I've been to Paris, France. I love it, like French culinary, particularly more like into the countryside. I don't like Paris. I don't like it. It has a certain vibe, full of tourists, like a lot of political nonsense. When you drive like towards south, when you go like to the inner cities, when you go like, to the Côte d'Azur, like those areas like far away from Paris, in my opinion, it does get much better. But still, I mean, when you compare like France, even France as a whole to Rio de Janeiro, Rio de Janeiro is a clear winner. Like you have so many different things you can enjoy in Rio de Janeiro, and the whole experience is much better, in my humble opinion. All right. So there you go. This is G20. Now, maybe I'm going to go back, to the question from the 552 talking about Joe Biden. We actually have Joe Biden in Brazil. Joe Biden arrived in Brazil today, right? Exactly today, Sunday. And here you can see a picture of President Joe Biden and Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley Biden. Ashley is this lady on the right side. They are arriving in Brazil, but guess what? They are not going to the G20, at least as of now. They are actually in Manaus. Manaus, for those of you who don't know, Manaus is the capital of Amazonas, right? And Amazonas and Amazon, they sound close, but they are not the same thing, right? Like Amazonas is a state within the geographic area known as the Amazon. Okay, so there are two things with a similar name, but they're not the same thing. There is a state called Amazonas, and then in Portuguese we also say Amazonas for the greater area, right? So the Amazonas, meaning the geographical location, is going to encompass multiple states in Brazil. But the main one is going to be naturally Amazonas, all right? So that's where President Joe Biden is as we speak, exactly as we speak, like he's over there visiting Manaus, which is the capital of the state of Amazonas. And just as a curiosity, that's also where my wife was born. My wife, she was born in Manaus, okay? And that's where President Biden is. President Biden had promised or suggested the United States was going to donate like $500 million to a specific fund to preserve the Amazon rainforests, right? And just for you guys to know, this is not a handout. That's actually, like a fund to which like most developed nations commit to fund in order to avoid Brazil from like developing the Amazon, right? Like, so it's a huge area in Brazil, and we are just basically like preserving, right? Like the idea here is that Brazil is preserving the Amazon area for the benefit of humankind, and therefore, if we are footing, the cost of preserving this area, if we are not taking advantage of this area, the idea here is that other countries need to step in and pay some money, to allow for such preservation. Of course, the preservation is not, perfect. You probably see in the news very often about, fires. There are naturally, farms who are gonna burn the rainforest to develop, like farms and so on. But the area in which Amazon sits is like gigantic, and it is a tough call for Brazil to do nothing with this gigantic area. With, by the way, there are reserves, for iron ore. There are reserves for gold. There are reserves for diamonds. So really tough call, right? Really tough call to expect Brazil to do nothing with all this land. But it is what it is. And going back to the pledging of $500 million by President Biden, reality is, like he said, well, I'm going to release like 50 million US dollars now. That's what I'm able to release, and let's see what the next president is going to do about. So that's the nature of the news that you're going to see on the same newspaper, Folha de São Paulo, which again is the main newspaper in Brazil. They're saying, well, it was promised 500, and now there's just $50 million, and that's not much money. Particularly when you remember about how much money the U.S. Was sending to Ukraine. President Trump highlighted, every trip that President Zelensky would, do to the United States, he would come back with $60 billion, right? Like, so when you compare this type of money to the 50 million, like you can see it's not like a substantial amount of money, but I guess, the Brazilian government should still be appreciative of this money. It's money that helps, yes, to kind of preserve the Amazon. All right, we have Ronnie Dio. Good to see you here, Ronnie. Well, didn't Lula, in his past time as a president, pull something like 20 million or 20% of population out of poverty? This hasn't been accomplished in the U.S. since FDR in the 30s. Absolutely, Ronnie. I couldn't say better. So Lula was president already twice in the past. So this is actually the third term for President Lula, right? But the first two, I think the first one, it was closer to year 2000, right? So maybe let's think about 2000, 2001, I don't know, to 2008. Right, so we're talking about pretty much like 20 years ago. So he was much sharper back then, and I would say, like he did do a great job. I think I did vote for President Lula for both terms, right? Like in the past, not here anymore, but in the past I did vote. Like he had a very clear agenda. And for his first term as a president, it was just the perfect agenda, okay? And it did work wonderfully. And yes, it did reshape Brazil's lower classes. Like he increased like those classes that are purchasing like a lot of household items, right? Like like fridges, stoves, like dishwashers. Like he brought into the economy a huge segment, right? And maybe just to not only emphasize the economic impact, like Ronnie said, I mean, he actually pulled people out of poverty. So that's a very good reminder, Ronnie, right? Like, so things changed a lot. I would say, like, more recently, President Lula was kind of involved in very, like very meaningful corruption cases, right? In which, which kind of landed him in jail. But if you look at this accomplishment, there is no other way of addressing as, other than saying that it was a huge accomplishment for President Lula, particularly like in the first decade of the 2000s, right? Like I think he was, very sharp. He had a clear direction, and he did accomplish a lot. All right, L&T. Hi, good to be here. I have a question regarding the business investment visa. Do you assist with that, and what is the success rate, particularly the one for the 150,000 Brazilian reais? L&T, welcome to the gang. Good to see you over here. So I can give you, like a few. I can give you a few highlights about the business investment visa, but just like to being very upfront, like we don't handle the business investment visa here at the firm, just because we think it is too prone to problems down the road, right? Like, so the business investment visa, as the name says, like you need to be part of a company. So you should be a shareholder in a Brazilian company, and you're going to invest money, and this company should have employment positions, right? And that's where the trouble starts. You're going to be committing to have, like employment positions to which you're going to need to pay all the labor benefits. There are going to be a bunch of taxes. And in my opinion, right, like, I mean, when people come from the United States or, other countries in which, the economical environment is favorable to entrepreneurs, I think it makes a lot of sense to pursue something like this. But I don't think it is the case in Brazil, right? You don't want to learn things on the fly. So my recommendation is to always uncouple like the immigration side of your things from the business side of things, right? Like if you are an entrepreneur, if you want to run a business in Brazil, by all means, do so, but do not do that, attach it to your immigration side of things, because this is gonna kind of restrict your range of movements within the company, and I just don't think it is a good idea. So I have another client of ours. He's like a digital nomad visa client, and he's asking us, listen, please help me with the business investment visa. I can pay your fees. Just tell me how much it is. And you say, listen, we don't want to do so, because if we assist you, and then, like 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, you are entangled in labor lawsuits, right? Like, I mean, you who's going to help you? We're not going to help you. We don't handle like labor litigation here at the firm. And then we send you to someone else, and then you're not happy, right? Like it becomes like a snowball, and then it's very natural for our clients to say, well, I mean, you could tell me I should know better, right? Like so, but we do that all the time. But people still, they say, well, with me it's gonna be different. I still want to do it. We don't do here at the firm, right? Now going back to the business investment visa, there are like the standard route is like 500,000 reais, which is a little bit less than 100,000 US dollars. And for this one, this is the regular route. The 150,000, it's gonna be a special type of route, 150,000 Brazilian reais, right? Like which is basically like 30,000 US dollars, right? This route is gonna be restricted to new technologies that you're gonna be presenting to Brazil. And then, of course, they're going to be much pickier with your business plan, with whatever you are presenting, with a new technology, and this makes the thing even more, like demanding on the applicant. We also had a recent applicant, right? Like he got this business visa elsewhere. Not surprisingly, the company went under like a couple of months down the road, and he was desperate to migrate to the real estate investment visa, right? Like, so he did buy, it was actually a couple of properties with us. He was from Canada, and he's still entangled to this with this kind of investment he did in Brazil. Not recommended at all. Not recommended at all. And therefore, that's why we don't do over here. But there are many other firms who handle that L&T, but we do not recommend, right? Like, I mean, we don't want to do things that we don't believe in, but there are other firms out there handling the business investment visa. Ronnie Dio, is it possible for a foreigner to rent a home on just a tourist visa while shopping for a home for the investment visa? Yes, Ronnie, it is possible, right? I mean, there is nothing precluding from a legal perspective a landlord to rent a house to you just as a tourist. However, I can tell you that Brazilian landlords, they don't feel comfortable with people without a residency. And what I saw happening in the past, like I remember a case in which our client was paying like 12 months upfront. So basically, it was a year-by-year rental agreement, and the client was paying like 100% upfront, because the landlord was saying, "Listen, I don't know where this guy comes from. Like, nobody in Brazil is renting houses with a passport, and if I'm gonna rent my house to this guy, it's gonna be, in a very safe way. So you just pay me the entire year upfront, and then yes, I'm gonna, rent the house to you." All right, Ronnie. So that's what you're gonna face in reality. Now, if you're gonna do that, you could also do like an Airbnb or another platform that's super common in Brazil is like the Booking.com. The Booking.com is actually way more famous in Brazil than Airbnb. So you could check both platforms, and you could do a rental on a month-by-month basis, because then you don't need to worry about documents. Just your passport is going to be fine. You present the passport after you book the place with Airbnb or Booking.com, and then you just renew on a monthly basis, and then you have all the freedom in the world, to shop for a home, for the real estate investment visa, all right? But landlords, they don't like to rent houses to people with a tourist visa. We had other clients in the past saying, well, but I want to get a regular contract. I don't like to be relying on something that is like temporary. And we said, that's all right. So first, get the digital nomad visa, and then you can rent, because then you have the Brazilian resident card. Landlords are going to see a Brazilian document saying that you are a resident. It does change things substantially. All right, Ryan. So another possibility for you is to get first the digital nomad visa, and then later on you apply for, you don't need to rush. You take your time to find the ideal property, and then once you buy the property, then yes, you apply for the real estate investment visa. All right, Ronnie. All right, Mark Burgard, I have 3 children that have Brazilian passports. So is that entitlement for a RNM, even though they are all adults now, please? Yes, Mark, there is no restriction. There is no place in the law saying that your children must be minors, right? There is no such requirement. So you're pretty good. Like if you have Brazilian children, yes, you can apply for the RNM, and even better, like your RNM would come as a permanent residency straight off the bat, right? So you don't go like when you invest in real estate, first you get 4 years as a temporary residency, and then after 4 years when you renew it, or before the 4 years, you renew on a permanent basis, right? But when you apply because of Brazilian children, then you get the permanent residency right off the bat. The major downside here that we see happening to a lot of people is that you're going to become a tax resident on the spot, right? So when you are investing in Brazil in real estate, the first 4 years, since it's temporary, is not going to trigger by itself the tax residency, right? Remember, it does not matter what, there is still the trigger of the 183, 184 days as a trigger for tax residency. But the 4 years, it does not by itself trigger the tax residency. However, the residency you're going to get because you have a Brazilian children, yes, it's going to trigger tax residency no matter what. So that's the only downside I can see in your path. But yes, adult Brazilian children, they allow you to get the permanent residency. And even better, after a single year of permanent residency in Brazil, you could apply for the Brazilian citizenship, right? And other applicants that don't have a Brazilian child or a Brazilian spouse, they need to wait 4 years to apply for the Brazilian citizen, right? So pretty sweet route, Mark. All right, let me see what else we have here in our backlog. Yes, so just a question I heard more than once, like this past week, about the currency exchange, right? Currency exchange rate. Like, I mean, can you tell if that's the best currency exchange, like U.S. citizens will ever get? And I told them, listen, for sure, I cannot tell you. I don't have a crystal ball. And, if anyone could tell what the currency exchange rate between US dollar and Brazilian reais it's going to be in the future, this person would become a billionaire, because then you could just buy, options in terms of how much. The options is the type of investment you do, like in the stock exchange, betting that a currency is going to go up and down. And then you either lose everything or you make a boatload of money, right? But if someone actually knew what was going to happen, they could just get all their resources and bet big in whatever they knew. But nobody knows, right? So my usual answer to that is going to be, listen, I can tell you something. Back in 1994, right? 1994, that's when the Brazilian real was created. Or it was 94, 96. In my head, it's 94 as we speak. So we're talking about 30 years ago. Our currency started in full parity with the US dollar. So meaning with a single US dollar, you would buy a single Brazilian real, okay? That was 30 years ago. And then over time, over the course of 3 decades, the currency exchange started to change substantially. And the US dollar has been buying more Brazilian currency over time. However, up to last year of 2023, a US dollar was buying pretty much like $4 and something, right? It has been very rare when you look like at those last 30 years for the US dollar to be buying more than 5 Brazilian reais. And nowadays, I think that the US dollar is buying like 5.6, 5.7, sometimes even 5.8 Brazilian reais. So I can tell you that this is the most that I ever saw happening, from a currency exchange perspective, right? Now, like the U.S. economy is like, despite all the complaining about all the, political issues, about all the imperfections that are so clear for the United States, maybe we can agree that there is no other nation on earth that is so good at developing economically, right? Like, and you can tell whenever there is a new wave of technology, the U.S. is going to be at the forefront of such technology, right? Like that was the case with the internet, that was the case with, social media, that was the case with, AI, right? Like, I mean, everything AI is from the U.S., right? Like, so, again, with all the issues, with all the imperfections of the U.S. economy, I think nobody is going to deny that the U.S. is still years and years and years ahead of everyone else. Okay, so that's my take on it. And from that perspective, I think there could still be some room for the U.S. Dollar to increase even more when compared to the Brazilian real. All right, so that's my take. Now, whenever we are handling our own currency exchange decisions, because we facilitate for our U.S. clients to pay many times in the United States, so we have like a bank account in the United States just for the purpose of facilitating payment by U.S. clients. And so sometimes we have some surplus of U.S. dollars in the U.S., and then we send it to Brazil. That's where we are based, right? And so we do make every now and then decisions, but we never try to bet. We never say, well, but I think, it's going to get even better. No, we never do that. We just go along and send the money as usual. And that's what we do. So that's usually the same recommendation that we handle, that we give it to our clients. It is to say that we don't actually, recommend you guys to bet on the currency exchange. I mean, nobody knows, right? Like, I mean, if you do it, it's going to be a personal decision. That's not something that we can advise on. The 552, do you live in Rio de Janeiro? 552, that's the place I stay most of the time when I run a business, right? But I don't know if I would say I live in a single place. Like, one of the beauties of running a cross-border business is that, like, I can, be in different locations. So I would say let's say our business residency, it's probably in Rio de Janeiro. That's where we have like most of our business is going to be Rio de Janeiro. We also have a strong presence in São Paulo because São Paulo, it's probably the business capital of Brazil. But I personally, prefer to call the state of Ceará my home in Brazil. The 552. That's where I really like to be personally, and that's gonna be Ceará. All right. So there you go. Like 3 cities, probably Rio de Janeiro, Ceará, not city, right? Like Ceará is a state. More like south of Fortaleza is a tiny town. The name of the town is Beberibe, so most people, they don't know about it. That's why I usually talk about Ceará or Fortaleza. But these are the 3 cities, the 552, that I am most of the time in Brazil. Dr. Orange, hi Oliveira, are there any common legal tax optimization strategies for people tax resident in Brazil, especially foreigners with offshore assets, income, etc.? Thanks. Yes, there are, Dr. Orange. Now, I'm not allowed to share legal strategies over here. I was, at the beginning of this live stream, I was explaining there is a decision from the Brazilian Bar Association in which we cannot comment specific points of legal nature in either a live stream or a live event. So it doesn't operate as a consultation, as a free consultation, right? Like, I mean, the Brazilian legal system, they have a big problem, right? Like, I mean, with people giving like free consultation, and therefore we cannot comment like on the specifics. Like, I could tell you probably 2 or 3 strategies I have in mind when it comes to your situation, but I cannot share over here. But yes, I can tell you there are strategies, and then I can tell you a little bit about taxation in general, because then I'm not answering your question. I'm more like, just explaining a specific topic to this audience at large. And it goes kind of like this, right? Like for different types of income, you're going to have different tax brackets. Okay, so I'm going to give an example. Up to 2023, U.S. citizens or any citizens for that matter, they would potentially have to pay a maximum bracket of 27.5% for their retirement income. And now, last year, effective for 2024, the Brazilian government said, you know what, like, I mean, a lot of people complain about paying taxes on retirement. Let's have a preferred bracket of 15% for any and all types of retirement income in Brazil. Okay, just 15% is a very favorable tax bracket. Additionally, Brazil is going to allow foreign citizens who have this income from abroad, for instance, again, U.S. citizens, if they have Social Security coming from the U.S., if they're already paying taxes on it, they could use the taxes that they paid in the U.S. in Brazil as a credit. So look at that, like you start with a favorable tax bracket of 15%, and you still get a credit for what you paid in the United States. So if you paid the 10% tax bracket in the United States, and if you need to pay 15% in Brazil, in theory, you could apply the 10% in Brazil and you would pay just 5%. So pretty reasonable, right? Like, and I think if you are living in a country, I mean, you gotta pay some type of taxes, right? So Brazil is currently making pretty easy for people to live in Brazil with, low tax brackets. Particularly if you're coming from Europe, like if you're coming from Europe from a country like the Netherlands, right, like from Germany, Portugal, in which tax brackets, they go up to 50%, which is difficult for us to wrap our heads around, something like 50%. But the reality is you're going to be just fine in Brazil. And yes, there are, tax optimization strategies and not very much with offshore, but with LLCs, like there is, some very specific strategies. And yes, so there are strategies, there are not so much strategies, but even like, this driver of the Brazilian government to make it easier for foreign citizens to live in Brazil without a crazy tax burden. All right, Dr. Orange. So I hope that was helpful. I see here we have Marisa and Ricardo. Thank you for chiming in, Marisa and Ricardo. Good to see you guys. Marisa and Ricardo, they are our boots on the ground in Portugal, Lisbon, right? Like, I mean, they are taking care of our office over there. So good to see you here, Marisa and Ricardo. All right, let's see if we have here a final question to answer, or a final topic to address. I see we have just 6 likes today. If you are participating in our live stream as we speak, I would appreciate if you could please like it. It does help our business, and it does help other people like you to find the content as well. And it's just, click on like, and there you go. If you want to subscribe, a good thing about subscribing is that, for future live streams, you receive a notification which helps you joining us. And we are also scheduling a live stream as usual for Wednesday. So if you have a topic of your interest you want to have discussed next Wednesday, do yourself a favor, subscribe, like the live stream, and then, follow us for more live stream. Mark is saying thanks for your helpful information, best wishes. Thank you very much, Mark. And we're going to end up now, but I do hope to see you guys again on Wednesdays, and with some probably other interesting topics to discuss. And you guys have a blessed rest of your Sunday. You take care.